Well, I must confess, when I read the title that I was to be preaching on today, I thought, where can I go with that? But anyway, um, I'm sure we can all find something to be thankful for in the summer. Just think for a moment. What are you thankful for that happened this summer? First of all, the beauty of trees and flowers remind us how to worship God in nature. We need to be grateful for God's gift of creation. Next, we think of the fruits and the vegetables that are only fresh in the summertime. Picture and taste a nice, juicy cob of corn, dripping with butter and salt. Delicious. I know, I'm sorry. And picture, bite into a newly picked peach and just feel that juice dripping down your chin. Or maybe tomatoes are your favorite. So go pick one off the vine. You can bite into it, or maybe you're going to slice it and put it with some mayo on a sandwich, maybe a little bit of bacon. That's summertime, and that's something we should be thankful for. Perhaps you're thankful for a trip that you took. New scenery, new people. That would be really wonderful, wouldn't it? Perhaps that trip enabled you to meet some older friends, some familiar friends, and to really share some precious moments together. This summer, I was thankful for an opportunity to do some fun things with my grandchildren, going to the African lion safari with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. It's a little bit tiring, but it was fun. My 2-year-old grandson decided to have a blue ice cream cone. And by the time he was finished, he looked like a Smurf. Now, children are going back to school. And I know by next summer, they'll have changed so much. They'll have grown, they'll have learned new things, and they'll be a different person. Just the other day, I was with my 4-year-old granddaughter, and we went over to the playground. And things that she couldn't even do last year, this year she could do them. And that's just how quickly they change. For many students, summer jobs are a good financial blessing, and they learn so many new things. My father had a roofing business in Toronto. It's a dirty job. And in the summer, he'd let my brother come and join him to earn some money. Well, after about 1 week, my brother decided this is not going to be what he was going to do the rest of his life, so he continued in school and got a job where he could teach and have clean hands. I spoke this past week to our summer students, Kylie and Henry, and they were wonderful, both of them. We've been really blessed with the students we've had during the summer. And I asked them, so what did you learn this summer? They said, well, they learned how to plan lessons, but they also learned that children don't get along very well all the time. And for both of them, Kylie especially, she's going to be a teacher, so it was a good thing she learned it now. But what I enjoy most and what I am most thankful for in the summertime is the opportunity to get out and meet my neighbors, especially those ones that have hibernated all winter and you haven't seen them. And now suddenly we're all walking on the streets and we're walking our dogs and we're chatting and we're telling lots of stories to each other of our lives, and we have a wonderful time. I really like the neighborhood that I am in. I walk a dog, so I even meet more people because I think when you're walking a dog, people think you're harmless. And the dogs come up, and it's a good thing we don't greet as dogs do. But but it just seems that, I've met people, I don't even know their names, but I know their dog's name. And we gather together, and we have a good time. I love sharing stories with people. When George was alive, we spent quite a bit of time at Arbor Trails, and we would have dinner with different people who lived there. And they had the most fascinating stories to tell you of their lives. This past summer, John and I attended the funeral, the memorial service for John Brookfield. And it was really a wonderful experience to hear from his family the many stories of his life. And then after, we got to meet with people, more people from the Arbor Trails. And one lady shared she'd lived in Russia. I've never lived in Russia. It was really interesting to hear her experiences. And some of the people that I live near, one of them lived in Saudi Arabia. One of them lived in Hong Kong. What experiences they've had. And then I share my stories with them too. We get to know each other, and we really do enjoy our time together. And I know it's not easy to go into a retirement home, but the people there are very blessed to have each other to share time with. In her book, Grounded, by Diane Butler Bass, she describes people create neighborhoods when they gather together beyond family ties, and they share resources. Connecting with others and sharing with others is very life-giving. Neighborhoods aren't always defined by a certain area. We remember this past year when 12 young boys and a soccer coach were stuck in a cave. Prayers came from all over the world. People came from all over the world to share and to help rescue them from where they were. That's loving your neighbor as yourself. And in Toronto, of course, neighbors came together to mourn the loss of lives killed for senseless reasons. The tributes for people harmed on Yonge Street and the Danforth were an example of neighbors sharing their love and their care. And all the world religions even make neighbors a central theme and how we should treat each other. The golden rule from Matthew 22 makes it quite clear. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's very simple. From the Hindu religion, they describe it as do not unto another, which would cause you pain if it was done to you. And the Islam religion believes that none of you believe until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. There's a short story from the book 100 Wisdom Stories from Around the World. A rabbi once asked his students how they could tell when night had ended and day was on its way back. And one fellow said, "It is when you can see an animal in the distance and you can tell whether it's a sheep or a dog." "No," said the rabbi. Someone else said, "It is when you can look at a tree in the distance and tell whether it's a fig tree or a peach tree." "No." "Well then," the student said, "when is it?" "It is when you look on the face of another human being and see that he or she is your brother or sister. Because if you cannot do that, then no matter what time it is, it'll still be night." The neighborhoods have changed with more diversity. Women often have to work, and languages are different. Remember those old days when you hung up clothes on the clothesline and you chatted by the back fence? That was a neighborhood time. But maybe it isn't very nice to have a neighbor who mows his lawn at 7:30 in the morning when you're trying to sleep. Well, maybe that fella has to have 2 jobs in order to be able to keep his home going. Peace has to begin with each and every one of us. Understanding the needs of other people help us to see them as a person just as we are, and not just someone different. We are all part of God's creation with a calling to walk with and beside others and listen to them and understand them. I have a Muslim neighbor. I thought she didn't like my dog. She never wanted to be near my dog. And I thought, oh, well, I'll keep my dog away from her. I don't know why. You know, it's a nice, friendly dog. And one day we were talking, and she said, if your dog gets saliva on my clothes, I can't pray until I have changed my clothes. So she really did like dogs, but it was part of her religion that she had to keep her clothes clean. Tonight I live down in the south end of town, and tonight the people of Pine Ridge are trying to gather people together in community with a firework display. So if you see fireworks going off in the sky, it's probably from the Pine Ridge community, and we're thankful for them. And in 2 weeks, the Westminster Woods community will hold a barbecue where everything is free, and it's the opportunity for neighbors to come together, to have a free meal, and to meet some of the merchants in the area. But, our neighborhoods are changing with so many different languages and so many different beliefs. And Jesus had the same problem when he was alive. Not all people got along. And that's why he told the story of the Good Samaritan. He wanted people to know how he expected people to treat each other. In our story of the Good Samaritan, a lawyer or a scribe asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" A man who we know nothing about is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, a very dangerous area. He's attacked by thieves and left half dead. Both a priest and a Levite passed by him on the other side of the road. And both men were highly respected in the community, but they did nothing to help the poor man. However, the least likely person to be able to help was a Samaritan. This Samaritan had oil, he had wine, he was able to bind up the man's sore. And then he had a donkey. He was well prepared. Put them on a donkey, take him to an inn, and see that he is cared for. J. Ellsworth Kalas, in his book Parables from the Backside, believes God often sends blessings into our lives through the most unlikely channels. As sure as you harbor ill will to an ethnic group, God will someday allow such a person to touch your life in a meaningful way. Kalas describes a time when he was going to a meeting in Cleveland, Ohio. He was in such a rush that he forgot to check his gas gauge. And as he approached the meeting place in the downtown area, he ran out of gas. He was a little frightened. It's not maybe the nicest part of town. Two fellas were standing there. They were looking at, a girly show where they worked. It wasn't a nice area, and they realized what was wrong. So they said, well, just a minute, we're going to siphon gas out of our own gas tank, and we're going to put the gas into your gas tank, and your car will be able to go. And it worked. And when Kalas offered to repay the man for the gas, he said, this is just the sort of thing one person ought to do for another. Jesus taught in parables, and he used a Samaritan to show how he expected people to care for one another. It would have had no influence at all if one of the priests or the Levite had helped. Those people were expected to do something like that. But when Jesus used a Samaritan to provide the help, it did have meaning. Jesus wanted to show that everyone is deserving of our love and our care. We have a responsibility to all human beings because someone is a human and inhabits the earth. He is our neighbor. Jesus had many teachings about how he wanted people to care for each other. And I love the passage from Matthew 25 read to us today. God blesses those who fed him when he was hungry, gave him a drink when he was thirsty, welcomed him when he was a stranger, clothed him when he was naked, took care of him when he was sick, and visited him when he was in prison. Jesus wants us to know that as we do it for others, we are also doing it for him. We need to see the face of Christ in everyone we meet. I trained at St. Joseph's Hospital in Toronto, and that was the motto that we were to adhere to as we worked. And believe me, there were nuns everywhere, making sure that your care was not only professional, but it was loving and caring. Some of the patients I had did not have Christ-like qualities, but when you realize that, when you looked at them with the face of Christ in them, you knew that this is what you were called for, to love and help others. Some of the neighbors we meet sure don't appear to be as Christ, but as a church and as a Christians, I'm sure we are all doing our best. Right here at our own church, we feed people through Contact Place, through the North End Harvest Market. We have our ministers and many of the people from here visit others when they're sick, when they're in their homes and unable to get out. We have people who bring shut-ins to church so that they can get to church. We may not physically visit people in prison, but there are other prisons which people face. Prisons of loneliness, prisons of not feeling accepted by others. Prayer shawls, therapeutic touch, reach out with love and acceptance to others in need. I believe we do our best, but there are communities which don't feel safe. Gunfire hurts innocent bystanders. Children have been harmed by merely playing in a park. Elderly women walking down Yonge Street in Toronto were run over. And families dining on the Danforth were hurt by gunfire. Neighborhoods which have been safe refuges for decades are now being threatened. But there is hope when strangers bow down to give CPR to somebody who's in distress, or when someone held the hand of a person who was dying after being injured. There is hope when Mothers Against Drunk Drivers petition the government for stronger penalties. And there is hope when students say enough is enough and they march for stricter gun laws in the United States. I love to watch the story When Calls the Heart. It's actually on Sunday evening. A couple of weeks ago, they had a saying, bad things happen when good people do nothing. I have another friend who says, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So we need to pray for sufficient resources for people with mental illness. We need to pray for laws that protect our children and our families. We need to pray that governments will use wisdom and a desire for peace instead of financial gain. Prayer and persistence are vitally important. The recent edition of The Observer featured a woman named Setsuko Thurlow on August the 6th, 1945. She was a young girl, and she was only 13 years old when the atomic bomb obliterated her home city of Hiroshima. Over 70,000 died in the initial blast, followed by as many in the years to come. Setsuko is now 86 years old, and recently she traveled to Oslo, Norway to receive the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the International Company to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Persistence and prayer. Wendelin, I know, shared with us a statement that children need at least 5 role models in their lives. And who are going to be their role models? Certainly parents and grandparents inherit that job. I've been proud of the students that we have had working here in the summer. Stephanie, Anna, Kylie, Henry, and we still have Cora and Anton and Angela, who work with our children, are certainly good role models for them. Last week, I looked for a new t-shirt for my 4-year-old granddaughter to return to school. And I was really impressed. You go into the Justice store with all the bling and all the shiny stuff, but there were t-shirts that said Justice, T-shirts that said respect. And maybe that's what we need to teach our children, that these are values that are very important. But the one that I picked out for my granddaughter said, being kind is cool. And I hope that that's the message that they're going to get. You know, we don't have some of the crazy slogans they used to have, T-shirts. But if being kind is cool, that would be a nice way for our children to grow up and learn. Let us pray that a new generation will grow up knowing about good values so that they will create neighborhoods that will be safe and peaceful to live in. Thanks be to God. Amen.